What's up, good people? Here we are. It is noontime on a Wednesday. In fact, Wednesday, February 9th. And you know how we do. We gather at this time to draw closer to God and to one another through the study of His Word. Thank God for every last one of you who hit the pause button in the middle of your day, whether this is your lunch break at work or perhaps you are in the middle of doing some things and stopped, or maybe you were just chilling and waiting for this time. Whatever the case, thank God for you that you would spend some time with us in the middle of the day, as I said, that we might come together to have a meaningful conversation. I am appreciative. I am grateful. And I mean that with everything in me, that you all would spend time listening and having a conversation with me. Thank God for all of the Elm Grove members, and shout out to the New Canaan members that are still with us. And of course, to all of you who are our visitors, whether you received an invitation or you happen to get a notice or you stumbled upon us, whatever the case may be, we appreciate you for joining us. Now, here's how we do this. We come together. We are tuned in, paying attention. We always keep our sacred scripture open, whether it is the book version or the electronic version. And as you probably have already saw, we always keep a writing apparatus, something to take notes with, so that we can take notes as we go along, and then we go back and we look at what we were able to learn, what we can share with other people. But most of all, we allow God to teach us as individuals, just as we have come together in a collective manner. We certainly appreciate and don't ever want to get started without giving a shout out to those of you who are watching this in the later version, in the replay version of Smart Church. See, we recognize that everybody can't pause at noon on a Wednesday, but the fact that you would take the time to join us in this moment or in your time, we know that you are making a sacrifice, and we appreciate you for doing so. I know I speak on behalf of all of us who have created this community. Please consider yourself a part of the community as well. Now, look, I know I'm pushing time, so let's get to what we came for. We're going to look at the Gospel of Matthew for this particular Smart Church session, the Gospel of Matthew chapter 7 and verses 15 through 20. Matthew chapter 7 verses 15 through 20. I'll read it for your hearing. This is Jesus talking. Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Verse 19, every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, by their fruit, you will recognize them. That is the reading of God's holy and unchangeable word according to the New International Version translation of the Bible. I want to talk about this notion of religion, spirituality, and theology. Don't let the words, the multisyllabic words, trip you out. And please don't let them intimidate you. You know us, man. We just talk to one another. But I think every now and then we ought to give consideration to what are we doing in this that we call our faith walk. We say we walk by faith and not by sight. So what are we really doing? So let's go on and let's just take this journey together. You know how we roll. If there are questions, please put them in the chat box. Please comment. Let's talk to one another. You don't have to just talk to me. Let's talk to one another as we go along. And so we know that chapter 7 in Matthew's gospel is a part of the sermon on what we call the Sermon on the Mount. Sermon on the Mount takes up chapters 5, 6, and 7. And it is that we are told that Jesus sits down on a hill or on a mountain, and he begins to teach the people, disciples, people who have put their trust and their faith in him. It is interesting because what we see happening, right, is that Jesus is really throughout from chapter 5 through chapter 7 is addressing fundamental issues of life and living, right? Jesus is just really teaching the people, you know, this is what you see happening around the world. This is how you make around your world. This is how you make sense of it. And this is how you respond to it or not respond to it, right? Jesus taught them, right, how to make sense of a world where you got to, you know, sometimes we read these in a kind of a read the scriptures in kind of a hyper spiritual matter. But if you look at it, man, these people live in a territory, in a country, a land that's been occupied and taken over by the Romans. And so this kind of stuff that we see on the world news, right? So they are living under an occupying force. And to make matters worse, the temple elite, the people that run the temple, that's supposed to be looking out for them, really just trying to do their best to get along with the Romans, you know, go along to get along so they can maintain their comfort and their privilege, right? The temple elite are assisting the Romans in overtaxing the people. And so Jesus takes the time, cares enough for the people to say, let me teach you how to handle what you're dealing with in this world. And interestingly enough, he starts the lessons in chapter 5 with what we call the Beatitudes, right? And he uses this running phrase with blessed are, you know, blessed are those that mourn, blessed are the hungry, and those who thirst for righteousness. He's just going down the list. Now remember, Jesus is talking to basically peasants who are living in a land that is occupied, and he is calling them blessed. It may make a little more sense when we recognize and remember that the term blessed is really an honorary title, right? That title signifies that one's life is fully satisfying to them, that one lives a life that other people want to emulate. They want what that person has. Now, think about this. Jesus is talking to people who are on the so-called lower rungs of the social ladder, if you will, and he is calling them blessed. The people that are a problem, right, for the Romans, Jesus is calling them blessed. The people that the Romans would just as soon wipe away their history and have nothing to do with where the Jews, they don't care about from whence the Jews come from. They don't care about their future. They don't care about any of that. And Jesus is calling these people blessed. I'm coming back to that point. And another thing I'd like to point out as it relates to the Sermon on the Mount is that when you read Matthew's version of the Sermon on the Mount, particularly the Beatitudes, what you'll notice is that he kind of hyper-spiritualizes everything. Blessed are the poor in spirit, right? Blessed, as I said earlier, blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness. Kind of makes it a spiritual matter. But I'd like you and write this one down. Write down Luke 6, 20 and 23. Get that in your notes. Luke 6, 20 and 23. Because Luke, when he gives his version or his account of what Jesus says, now take a good look at that language. Matthew gives an account of what Jesus said. Luke gives an account of what Jesus said, except when Luke gives an account of what Jesus says, Luke kind of makes it more plain, and he really addresses issues like poverty, hunger, sadness, and hatred. Now, I won't read it for you, right? Luke 6:20 and 23. I want you to go back and check it out for yourself. But Luke is essentially, dealing with the issues that the people have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And so in both accounts, Matthew and Luke, what we find is that Jesus is Jesus is giving a word of encouragement, right, to the people who were dealing with a whole lot, to remind them God is on your side. Now, I like to pause when we make those kind of little statements because it really sounds churchy and, kind of otherworldly kind of stuff, right? Ethereal, if you will. But man, maybe sometimes we ought to pause and just consider, right? Let our minds meditate on sometimes the very simple phrases. God is on your side. Just pause for a little while, right? Take a few minutes and sit in that, if you will, for a minute, and let that come over your consciousness, and consider all that would mean, right? From your earliest awareness of God, which we will talk about, your earliest awareness of God, up until this present moment. What does that mean? God is on. Put your name in that slot right there. God is on your side. So let's keep going. Are we all right? We're together? I want to make sure now. All right, so look at it. By the time we get to chapter 7 in the Sermon on the Mount and verse 15, remember Jesus is giving instructions about how to make sense of this world in which they are living, right? And how they might adapt themselves and move around in this world. He starts to talk about false prophets. And I know you've probably been hearing about false prophets all of your time, of having anybody tell you anything about the Bible. But let's just, for the sake of it, let's walk through this conversation, right? So Jesus is addressing the trouble of false prophets who are moving around among the believers, and they are recognized, you'll want to write this, they are recognized by their made-up doctrine. The word is contrived. Their made-up doctrine and their self-focus. We'll walk that through. False prophets are recognized by their made-up doctrine, or in other words, does it match what the sacred scripture says? Remember, a few years ago when we started Smart Church, one of the things that we decided is that we wanted to know what the scripture says. Remember, Jesus asked the question of the young lawyer, how readest thou? How do you interpret the scripture? And what we determined to get to is, okay, we're not really interested in what you think it is, what your imagination says. And because, most of the time when you hear people say, the Spirit told me the scripture, it really saying your imagination is telling you, because God's Spirit is not going to tell us anything that the Word does not say. Do you recall that? In fact, what we said is we want to know what the scripture meant to the one who wrote it. And for our sake, this is Matthew writing about 60 to 70 years after Jesus ascended back to heaven. And he writes to a group of believers in the first century who are catching it, right? They are going through because of their newfound faith. Their basis or their background is Judaism, but they believe in Jesus. And so Matthew writes to tell them about Jesus to encourage them, to strengthen them, to uplift them. And so Jesus says, watch out for the false prophets, because they're making up doctrine, and everything they talk about is centered around them. So what Jesus describes essentially is people who have appointed themselves, right? They haven't been, we say in our tradition, called, right? They haven't been summoned or invited by God. They appointed themselves. These are people, right, who take it upon themselves to distribute information concerning God that God did not say. These are people who have given themselves religious titles. They operate with the false idea that it is the title and the notoriety that gives them credence. Oh, you better check that, because I know you've seen that person, those people who give themselves doctorate degrees, who call themselves, right, all of a sudden, yesterday they were minister, today they bishop. Or, you know, H. Beecher Hicks Joseph, you know, we got archbishops running around, and sooner or later we're going to have a Protestant pope, with people giving themselves their own titles, right? Frank Thomas calls it baptism without a witness. You just baptized yourself and nobody was there to see it. So false prophets, right? These people put on religious facades, right? And appear to have real concern or genuine concern for the people, right? And their well-being, when the fact of the matter is they're just trying to push their own agendas, right? Or they're trying to see what they can gain or get out of a particular situation. And they'll come to you with the right demeanor, right? I'm just a humble servant, right? But Jesus said, if you look back at verse 15, Jesus says, they come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. In other words, they pretend to play the role, right? They pretend to play the role when the fact of the matter is they just ready to pounce and consume your time, your talent, your resources, even your favor, right? Even your compassion for them, right? And before we go too long or go too hard on those first century false prophets, can we admit we have some false prophets running around in our day and time, right? They look the part, they even know the right language, right? But they are modern day false prophets who or twist. They twist the meaning of our sacred scriptures to fit their agendas, because all they want to do is P-R-O-F-I-T. They just want to profit in some way or another. You've heard it out there before, right? That this preaching thing is a lucrative game, man. If you can get in, you can build a big business. Have you heard that before? I know I have. And so what you find yourself dealing with, and yeah, I'm going hard, right? I'm a preacher, so I can go hard. What you find yourself dealing with is a mixture of shade tree psychiatry and knockoff philosophy and a fabricated intellectual stream called life coaching. What in the world is life coaching, right? Life is going to teach you about life. You don't need no coach. Come closer. And so what they do is announce the promises of God, on behalf of God, right? That God never said and God will not keep. And all the while, all you hear is their name, right? Because part of the game is, in order to get to God, you got to come through me. That's a false prophet. So how does Matthew tell us that Jesus said to deal with it? Do I need to slow down? Are we all right? How does Matthew say we need to deal with it? Matthew have Jesus say we need to deal with it. The word beware. Jesus says beware. You need to check that out, because when we're talking about beware, it gives us two meanings there. One means to remember. I know you're getting this in your notes. Beware. The first instance is remember. The second is pay attention. Remember and pay attention. Because see, when you don't remember, you eventually fall for the wolf in sheep clothing bit, right? When you don't remember what you were taught, when you don't remember what you saw in your elders or you heard about your ancestors, when you don't remember your life, your own life's experiences, that's how the wolf in sheep's clothing bit works, right? When you don't remember how God reacted in your life or acted in your life before, that's how you get caught up in all of this old twisted up interpretations of the sacred scriptures. So Jesus says, that's why I need you to remember for his audience's sake, right? He's talking about you got to remember the Torah. You got to remember the prophets. You have to remember the books of wisdom, Psalms and Proverbs and Ecclesiastes and the Song of Solomon, right? But for our sake, man, you got to go back and look through history. You got to look at how we relate to God, how God has handled us as a people, as a community, and then how God has handled you and your family, your people as individuals. Remember. The second is pay attention, right? Pay attention, or they will take advantage of you, take advantage of us, and we won't even realize what's happening. Let me just use some kind of crass language. Has anybody ever made a fool of you? I know you got it like that, and not you, but be honest with yourself. You don't have to show anybody your notes. You know, we used to say, you ever got before? You know, where you look up and say, dog, they got me, or I've been swindled, or man, I wouldn't have let it go down like that if I was paying attention. I think that's 99.999% of us, right? When you're not paying attention, those wolves in sheep's clothing will get you, man. So Jesus says you got to be aware. You got to pay attention. Your mind, our minds have to be sharp. We have to be knowledgeable. Hence the importance of learning what we're doing together right now. Remember and pay attention. That's beware. Remember and pay attention. I hope we're still together. Look at it again, because in verse 16 you read these words. You will know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? You will know them by their fruits. Know. The word know there, K-N-O, is the Greek word epigenosko. Epigenosko. E-P-I-G-I-N-O-S-K-O. E-P-I-G-I-N-O-S-K-O. Epigenosko. And it means to recognize by the mark. To recognize by the mark. And for our sake and for real meaning in the text, it means to recognize by the fruit that they bear or that they produce. So you will know them by their mark, and their mark, you know, like mark on the head or mark on the arm. Their mark is the fruit that they bear or produce. So God has given us the ability to discern what we are witnessing. Oh, that's good stuff right there. God has given us the ability to discern through remember and pay attention what we are witnessing, right? By what we are taught and by what is produced. You know good or corrupt fruit when you see it. So what you'll recognize is that these false prophets will talk more about themselves than they do about God. And when they do that, yeah, no mistake, they will gain followers, right? They will gain followers. Even our sacred scriptures say people have itching ears. They want to hear what they want to hear, right? They will gain followers and it'll look right, right? But don't always run with the crowd, because that crowd is probably more interested in entertainment than they are in the truth. Go on and talk though, man. They probably will gain a crowd, right? But that crowd will probably misunderstand God and think that seeking justice is a gift, right? That's not my gift. No, it's not. It's everybody. It's what we are supposed to be doing, right? That crowd, be careful about it, because that's probably going to be a crowd that will reduce God to things, to stuff, to material, right? To God, to reduce God to materialism. Think about that. We've all seen it before. Beware of the false prophets. Look again, and let's talk a little bit more. Because I would suggest to you, and the reason, and now here's the crux of what I wanted to say. The issue is probably not the fruit. The issue is probably the tree. I'll say that for you again. The issue is probably not the fruit. The issue is probably the tree. Write this somewhere in your notes where you will notice it. If the tree is sick, do we try to heal the leaves or do we fix the roots? Question mark. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about at Smart Church Amplified tonight at 7 o'clock. If the tree is sick, do we try to heal the leaves or do we fix the roots? See, when we read this text, what we recognize, and in every case, is that the fruit is a product of the tree and not the tree a product of the fruit, right? In fact, Matthew says that Jesus points out that the tree will either produce what is good or what is corrupt. The tree will either produce what is good or what is corrupt. Good, you want to get this in your notes. Good meaning what is beneficial, right? What makes a situation better. Good means that it is appealing to all of our senses, right? Good means, like your mom and them say, is good for you. Now, corrupt is a different story. While good means beneficial, in this context, corrupt means worthless, right? It means it adds nothing of value to any given situation. Now, just this is an aside, but I do think it's interesting for you to kind of know. This is a for your information kind of statement. It reminds me, Dr. Jeremiah Wright used to call this a biblical footnote. New Testament scholars Molina and Pilk, you don't need to, you just spell it the best way. The spelling is not important, right? They said that what was happening was Jesus was probably looking at a tree that grew in that area that was called that produced a fruit called the Sodom apple. as in Sodom and Gomorrah, the Sodom apple, right? And that tree grew and produced a fruit that looks good to eat. It is pleasing to the eyes, but the rind, the cover, the rind of the fruit was used to poison wells, water wells. And the seeds of the fruit would blow away in the wind. You couldn't even hardly, they were of such no good, right? They were no good in the manner that if you held them in their hand, they just blow away. And the sap from the fruit was irritating to your skin, right? So to the eyes, it looked like, man, that's some good fruit. But the rind, the covering could kill you. The sap would irritate your skin and the seeds would blow away. That's what Jesus described as what the false prophets were teaching. Man, that kind of brought it home for me. Because I think about, right, some of this stuff that we hear and see in the name of religion and spirituality and theology. You look at that, man, and it all is because people are running and shouting and throwing money on the stage, and preacher is spitting and sweating, and the choirs and all of that stuff. And Jesus say, and if it's not sound doctrine, right? Because there is a lot of good happening in the kingdom. Don't let me fool you. Now, I don't want you to think that I think we the only ones. No, there are a lot of people doing a lot of great things for the kingdom. But if it's not matching God and what God said, right, then the cover will kill you. The seeds will blow away, and the sap will irritate your skin. Come closer. So now, so we just explained Jesus is talking about the false prophets, right? False prophets are the trees that produce the bad fruit. And most of the time we apply this kind of, this teaching, this section to our own lives, our personal piety. You'll want to get that down in your notes. Personal piety, right? To talk about our behaviors and our attitudes as it relates to what God says and what God expects and God's standards. So I want you to put this passage of scripture in your notes, 2 Peter 1, 6 and 7. 2 Peter 1, 6 and 7. And I won't read it. I want you to go back and read it, but I'll give you the domain remix. How about that? And you don't have to try to write it down, because once you read it, perhaps you'll go through and put your own, right, your own remix, your own interpretation of what is being said. So when I read it, I see, conduct yourself with moral excellence. Personal piety. Conduct yourself with moral excellence. Control yourself. You don't have to fall for every temptation. Endure patiently, right? Do what you can and expect God to do the rest. Be faithful. Can God count on you? Can your people, can we count on you? Show concern for others. And then finally, help others. Treat other people better than you want to be treated. That's it. I'll say it again. Conduct yourself with moral excellence. Do what's right, man. Control yourself, because you don't have to fall for temptation. Endure patiently. Do everything you can and expect God to do the rest, especially when you're dealing with issues. Isaiah said, wait on the Lord, right? David said, wait on the Lord. Again, I say, wait on the Lord. And we know that waiting means to be in motion while expecting God to do. The next one is, be faithful. And it's very simple questions. Can God count on you? Can your people, can we count on you? Show concern for others, and then finally help others. Those two can be summed up in treat other people better than you want to be treated. That's personal piety, right? That's our behavior and our disposition. I would really say that in essence, that's the picture of true community. Boy, if we could get people to act like that, we'd have an unstoppable community. The last thing I want to tell you today at noon, and then we're back tonight for Smart Church Amplified, is that it's really about putting practice over profession. I'll say that again. Put practice over profession. You'll want to get in your notes Luke chapter 6, verse 46. Luke chapter 6, verse 46. Right? Where Jesus says, "But why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do the things which I say? But why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do the things which I say?" Right? You already know that one. You don't need anybody to interpret that. Why are you calling on me and you don't do what I tell you to do? You won't follow the instructions. That's where we'll come. No, I got one more little small thing to say as it relates to this issue of personal piety. Now, I'm not trying to take anybody's Jesus from them, and I'm not trying to mix anything with your Christianity. Write and look up the 42 divine principles of Mayat. The 42 divine principles of Mayat. It comes from ancient Kemet. It was the way that our ancestors constructed their society, their culture. 42 of them. I won't read them for you. Many people say that since Moses spent so much time in Egypt, this is where he got the idea for the 10 Commandments. I'll let you wrestle with that one. But I can tell you what I've tried to do is at the end of the night, in my end of the day rituals, I take those 42 principles or 42 laws of Mayat and go down the list and say, Lord, I have not sinned against you on purpose today, and if I did, forgive me. I have not committed robbery or violence. All the way down the list, all 42. So that gives me a way to check myself. Check it out. We'll talk about it. Listen, remember, Dr. Angela loves you. I love you. And I will see you tonight at Smart Church Amplified. Peace.